The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves as I approached Silas's weathered cabin. The old man, his face a roadmap of wrinkles etched by wind and sun, sat on his porch, a tattered fishing net draped over his bony shoulders. He watched me approach, his eyes, the color of faded moss, twinkling with a mischievous glint. "Well, well, well," he rasped, his voice a low growl that seemed to rumble from deep within his chest. "Look what the tide has washed ashore." I forced a smile, though a shiver ran down my spine. Silas, with his leathery skin and unsettlingly intense gaze, always gave me the creeps. "Evenin', Silas," I mumbled, trying to keep my voice steady. "Beautiful night for a fishin' trip, ain't it?" He chuckled, a dry, rattling sound that echoed through the stillness. "Beautiful night indeed," he agreed, his gaze sweeping across the lake, which lay shrouded in an eerie mist. "But there's more to this lake than meets the eye, boy. More than just fish." I tried to laugh it off, but the words hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Silas, with his years spent on the lake, knew its secrets, the whispers of the wind, the sighs of the water. He spoke of ancient beings, of forgotten gods who slumbered beneath the surface, their power stirring in the depths. I dismissed his words as old man's tales, the ramblings of a mind weathered by years of solitude. But Silas insisted, his eyes gleaming with a strange intensity. "Tonight," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "we'll go deep, deeper than we've ever gone before. We'll fish for something different." Intrigued and a little apprehensive, I agreed. I couldn't quite explain it, but a strange sense of foreboding washed over me. It was as if the very air around Silas was thick with a palpable sense of dread. As the sun began its descent, casting long, eerie shadows across the lake, we prepared for our expedition. Silas, his face illuminated by the flickering flame of a kerosene lantern, meticulously checked his gear, his movements deliberate and almost ritualistic. He sharpened his hooks with an unsettling fervor, muttering to himself in an ancient tongue that I didn't understand. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. This wasn't just a fishing trip. It was something more, something sinister. Silas, with his unsettling knowledge of the lake's dark secrets, was clearly up to something. As we pushed off from the shore, the mist swirling around us like a shroud, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were venturing into the unknown, into a realm where the rules of nature no longer applied. The lake, usually a mirror reflecting the twilight sky, now churned and roiled, the water a menacing black abyss. Silas, his face a mask of grim determination, steered the old wooden boat with an uncanny precision, navigating through the treacherous currents and hidden reefs. I watched him, mesmerized by his uncanny connection to the lake, a connection that seemed to border on the supernatural. As we ventured further and further from the shore, the air grew colder, the mist thickening, obscuring the stars. The sounds of the night, the distant croaking of frogs, the mournful cries of owls, were replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the rhythmic lapping of the waves against the hull of the boat. A sense of dread, cold and insidious, began to creep over me. I tried to dismiss it, to focus on the beauty of the night, but the feeling persisted, a constant, gnawing fear that something was terribly wrong. The silence was broken by the sudden tightening of my fishing line. I braced myself, my heart pounding against my ribs like a war drum. The creature at the other end was powerful, a relentless force that seemed to defy all logic. It pulled against the line with such ferocity that I feared the rod would snap in two. I gripped the rod tightly, my knuckles white, and fought back, inch by agonizing inch. The creature, whatever it was strong, incredibly strong. It surged and dived, pulling the line deep into the murky depths, then lunged towards the surface, its movements erratic and unpredictable. After what seemed like an eternity, I managed to reel in the line, my arms trembling with exhaustion. As the creature broke the surface, I gasped. It was not a fish. It was something else entirely. A serpentine creature, its body sleek and oily, writhed and twisted on the surface of the water. Its eyes, large and black as night, fixed on me with an unsettling intensity. I could feel its gaze, cold and penetrating, piercing through my very soul. Silas, his face a mask of grim satisfaction, reached for the creature. A lamprey, he rasped, his voice thick with excitement. A relic from the ancient past. The lamprey, sensing danger, lashed out, its teeth, sharp as needles, glinting in the moonlight. It lunged towards Silas, its movements swift and unpredictable. He, however, was too quick, his hand clamping down on its head with surprising force. The creature thrashed violently, its body contorting in a desperate struggle for freedom. It writhed and twisted, its powerful jaws snapping and gnashing, but Silas held firm, his grip unwavering. He grinned, his eyes gleaming with a predatory glint. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the creature's frantic thrashing. As I watched Silas examine the lamprey, a chilling realization dawned on me. This wasn't just a fishing trip. Silas knew what he was doing. He had been deliberately seeking out this creature, this ancient predator from the depths. I felt a wave of unease wash over me. Silas, with his unsettling knowledge of the lake's dark secrets, was clearly up to something far more sinister than he had let on. I had the distinct feeling that I had unwittingly become entangled in something far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. That night, sleep eluded me. The image of the lamprey, its eyes burning with malevolent intelligence, haunted my dreams. I dreamt of its cold, slimy skin, of its razor-sharp teeth, of its predatory gaze that seemed to pierce my very soul. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I felt a strange presence in the room, a chilling sensation of being watched. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen energy. I heard whispers, faint at first, then growing louder, more insistent. They seemed to emanate from the walls, from the floorboards, from the very air itself. The whispers spoke in an ancient tongue, a language I didn't understand, a language of shadows and whispers, of ancient curses and forbidden knowledge. The whispers spoke of the lake, of the creatures that lurked beneath its surface, of a power stirring, a malevolent force awakening. They spoke of me, of my intrusion into their domain, of the price I would pay for my curiosity. Terror gripped me, a cold, paralyzing fear that threatened to consume me. I tried to ignore the whispers, to bury myself beneath the covers, but it was useless. They seeped into my mind, filling me with a growing sense of dread. I felt a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. I wasn't alone. Something was in the room with me, something unseen, something watching. I could feel its gaze, cold and penetrating, boring into my very soul. I tried to call out, to scream, but no sound would escape my lips. I was trapped, paralyzed by terror, at the mercy of an unseen, malevolent force. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they seemed to fill the room. A cacophony of unseen voices, each one a chilling reminder of the danger that lurked in the shadows. The next morning, I woke up to find Silas standing over me, his face etched with concern. "You look terrible," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Didn't sleep well?" I shook my head, unable to speak. The events of the previous night had left me shaken, my mind reeling from the whispers, the fear. Silas studied me for a moment, his eyes narrowed. "Something is wrong," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You've been marked." I stared at him, bewildered. "Marked?" "Yes," he said, his voice barely audible. "By the lake, by the creatures that dwell within its depths." I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. "What do you mean, marked?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. Silas hesitated, his gaze fixed on the floor. "The lake," he began, his voice dropping to a hushed tone. "It has a way of claiming what it desires. It leaves its mark on those who delve too deep, who disturb its slumber." He reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Don't worry," he said, his voice soothing. "I'll help you." He led me back to the lake, but this time we didn't go fishing. Instead, he took me to a hidden cove, a secluded spot known only to him. It was a place of eerie beauty, a small alcove hidden behind a curtain of weeping willows, where the sunlight struggled to penetrate. There, amidst the towering cliffs, he performed a strange ritual. He gathered a handful of moss, chanting in an ancient tongue that I didn't understand, a guttural language that seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly power. He sprinkled the moss on the water, and the surface of the lake erupted in a shower of iridescent bubbles, each one shimmering with an eerie light. "This will cleanse you," he said, his voice grave. "It will ward off the darkness." As I watched the bubbles rise and dissipate, I felt a strange tingling sensation, as if a cold hand was tracing patterns across my skin. The whispers, which had been tormenting me all night, suddenly ceased, replaced by an unsettling silence. I looked at Silas, my eyes wide with a mixture of fear and gratitude. He smiled, a chilling, almost predatory smile. "The lake has its own ways of balancing the scales," he said, his voice low and ominous. "It takes, but it also protects." I didn't understand what he meant, but I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that something had changed. The lake, with its ancient secrets and hidden dangers, had claimed me, and I was no longer the same. Silas, sensing my curiosity, began to tell me about the history of the lake. He spoke of ancient legends, of forgotten gods and monstrous creatures that lurked in its depths. He spoke of the sacrifices that had been offered to the lake, of the souls that had been claimed by its insatiable appetite. He told me of a time long ago when the lake was a sacred site, a place of both worship and dread. The local tribes, fearing its power, had offered sacrifices to appease the ancient spirits that resided within its depths. They would leave offerings of food, of precious metals, and sometimes of their own kind. He spoke of the whispers, the eerie sounds that emanated from the lake, the whispers of the ancient ones, their voices echoing through the ages. He said that the lake was not just a body of water, but a portal to another realm, a realm where the laws of nature did not apply, a realm where ancient evils slumbered, waiting to be awakened. As Silas spoke, I felt a chill creep down my spine. The lake, which I had once considered a source of tranquility, now seemed to me a malevolent entity, a gaping maw ready to devour the unwary. I learned that the lamprey I had caught was not just an ordinary creature. It was a guardian, a sentinel of the lake, a creature that guarded the secrets of the ancient ones. Silas, with his knowledge of the lake's dark history, had been deliberately seeking out the lamprey, hoping to learn more about the creatures that lurked beneath the surface. He believed that the lamprey, with its ancient wisdom, held the key to understanding the lake's secrets. I realized that I had unwittingly become entangled in something far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. Silas, with his unsettling knowledge and his own enigmatic motives, was playing a dangerous game, a game that could have dire consequences for us both. The next few days were a blur of unsettling experiences. I would wake up in the night, convinced that I was being watched, the whispers returning, louder and more insistent than before. The lake, once a source of tranquility, now seemed to me a malevolent entity, its gaze fixed on me, judging, assessing. I tried to confide in my friends and family, but they dismissed my concerns as the ramblings of a man who had spent too much time on the water. They couldn't see the fear in my eyes, the terror that gnawed at my soul. One evening, as I sat on my porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I saw him, Silas, standing on the opposite shore of the lake, his figure silhouetted against the fiery sky. He raised his hand in a silent greeting, then turned and disappeared into the deepening shadows. But something was different about him. He moved with an unnatural grace, his movements fluid and predatory. His eyes, gleaming in the twilight, seemed to burn with an inner fire. A wave of dread washed over me. Silas, I realized with a chilling certainty, was changing. The lake, with its ancient secrets and dark magic, was transforming him, twisting him into something else. I knew I had to get away, to escape the lake's influence before it was too late. But how could I escape when the lake seemed to be everywhere? Its presence felt in the very air I breathed. I spent the next few days preparing for my departure. I packed my belongings, said goodbye to my friends and family, and tried to prepare myself for the journey ahead. But the fear, the constant, gnawing fear, never left me. I knew that the lake would not let me go easily. It would fight to keep me within its grasp, to claim me as its own. The day of my departure finally arrived. I packed my belongings into my truck, the weight of my fears weighing heavily on my shoulders. As I drove away from the lake, I glanced back one last time. The lake, shimmering in the afternoon sun, seemed to beckon me back, its surface rippling with unseen energy. I pressed down on the accelerator, eager to put as much distance between myself and the lake as possible. But the lake, it seemed, was not willing to let me go so easily. As I drove, I felt a strange sensation, as if I was being watched, followed. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but there was nothing there. Just the empty road stretching out before me, shimmering in the heat. I continued to drive, my heart pounding against my ribs. The feeling of being watched intensified, a cold dread creeping into my bones. I could feel it, a presence lurking in the shadows, a malevolent force tracking my every move. I stopped at a roadside diner, desperate for a break, for a moment to regain my composure. As I sat at the counter, sipping my coffee, I noticed a figure sitting in the booth across from me. It was a man, his face obscured by the shadow of his hat. He was staring at me, his eyes fixed on me with an unsettling intensity. I felt a chill creep down my spine. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I was not alone. I left the diner, my heart pounding. I knew I was being followed. The figure in the booth had watched me with an unsettling intensity, his gaze burning into me. I tried to lose him, driving erratically, taking back roads and detours. But he was always there, lurking in the shadows, a persistent shadow that seemed to follow me. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but there was nothing there. Just the empty road stretching out before me, shimmering in the heat. But I could feel his presence, a cold, malevolent force tracking my every move. As the day wore on, the feeling of being watched intensified. The shadows seemed to lengthen, the world around me taking on an eerie, sinister cast. I felt a constant sense of unease, as if I was being drawn into a dark, inescapable abyss. I stopped at a gas station, my hands trembling as I filled the tank. As I paid for the gas, I noticed a strange symbol etched into the gas pump, a symbol that I had seen before, carved into the rocks near the lake. A wave of dread washed over me. The lake, with its ancient power, was reaching out, its influence spreading like a contagion. I was trapped, a pawn in a game I didn't understand, a game with stakes far higher than I could have ever imagined. I continued to drive, my mind racing, trying to figure out what to do. I knew I couldn't go back to the lake, but I also knew that I couldn't stay on the road, not with the unseen force closing in on me. As the sun began to set, casting long, eerie shadows across the landscape, I decided to take a chance. I spotted a small, abandoned cabin nestled deep within the woods. It was a dilapidated structure, the windows boarded up, the paint peeling from the weathered wood. But it offered shelter, a temporary refuge from the unseen forces that pursued me. I drove towards the cabin, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. As I approached the cabin, The air grew heavy, thick with a palpable sense of dread. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the mournful cries of unseen creatures. I parked the truck a safe distance from the cabin, my eyes constantly scanning the surrounding woods, searching for any sign of movement. I could feel the presence of the unseen force intensifying, a cold, malevolent energy that seemed to emanate from the depths of the forest. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my backpack and stepped out of the truck. I moved cautiously towards the cabin, my senses on high alert. The silence was deafening, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant howling of wolves. As I approached the cabin, I noticed strange symbols carved into the doorframe, symbols that I recognized from the rocks near the lake. A wave of dizziness washed over me. The lake, with its ancient power, was reaching out, its influence spreading like a contagion. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob, but the cold, biting wind and the growing darkness urged me to enter. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The interior of the cabin was dark and dusty, the air thick with the smell of decay and damp earth. Cobwebs clung to the walls, and a layer of grime covered the furniture. I flicked on the flashlight, its beam illuminating the desolate interior. The cabin was sparsely furnished. A single bed, a rickety table, and a few mismatched chairs. As I explored the cabin, I found a hidden compartment behind a loose floorboard. Inside, I discovered a collection of ancient artifacts, strange talismans, and a book filled with cryptic symbols and chilling warnings. The book spoke of the lake, of its ancient power, of the creatures that lurked beneath its surface. It warned of the dangers of delving too deep, of the price that must be paid for disturbing the slumber of the ancient ones. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. The lake, with its ancient secrets and hidden dangers, was more powerful than I had ever imagined. It was a force of nature, a malevolent entity that would stop at nothing to reclaim what was rightfully its. As I traveled deeper into the book, I began to understand the true nature of the danger that I faced. The lake, with its ancient power, had awakened something within me, something dormant, something primal. I was becoming one with the lake, my senses attuned to its rhythms, its whispers. I could feel the presence of the creature that had been following me, its gaze burning into me, its power growing stronger with each passing moment. I knew I couldn't stay in the cabin. I had to confront it, to face the creature that had been hunting me. I armed myself with a rusty axe I found in the shed, its blade gleaming menacingly in the moonlight. I stepped out of the cabin, my heart pounding against my ribs. The forest was a sea of shadows, the air thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. I moved cautiously through the woods, my senses on high alert. The creature was close. I could feel its presence, a cold, malevolent energy that seemed to emanate from the depths of the forest. Suddenly, I heard a sound, a low growl, a sound that seemed to come from deep within the earth. I spun around, my axe raised, my heart pounding like a drum. In the distance, I saw it. A figure emerged from the shadows, its form elongated and grotesque. It moved with an unnatural grace, its movements fluid and predatory. The creature was unlike anything I had ever seen before. Its skin was pale and translucent, stretched taut over its bony frame. Its eyes, large and black as night, glowed with an eerie light. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This was no ordinary creature. It was something ancient, something evil, something that should not exist in this world. The creature let out a low, guttural moan, its voice echoing through the forest. It lunged towards me, its claws raking across the bark of a nearby tree. I raised my axe, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. I was ready to fight, to defend myself against the creature that had been hunting me. The fight was brutal, a desperate struggle for survival. The creature was incredibly strong, its movements swift and unpredictable. I fought back with all my might, my axe flashing in the moonlight. But the creature was relentless. It dodged my attacks with uncanny agility, its movements fluid and graceful. I could feel its power, a raw, primal force that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the earth. I was losing. The creature was closing in, its claws inches from my face. I felt its hot breath on my neck, the stench of decay filling my nostrils. Just as the creature was about to deliver the final blow, something unexpected happened. The whispers, the ancient voices that had been tormenting me, suddenly grew louder, more insistent. The creature flinched, its eyes widening in fear. It let out a guttural scream, a sound of pure terror. The whispers continued, a cacophony of unseen voices, weaving a spell of protection around me. The creature recoiled, its movements becoming sluggish, its power waning. I took advantage of its momentary hesitation. I swung my axe with all my might, the blade sinking deep into the creature's flesh. It let out a blood-curdling shriek, then collapsed to the ground, its body twitching violently. I stood over the creature, my heart pounding, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I had survived. As the creature lay dying, the whispers subsided, replaced by an eerie silence. The forest, which had been alive with the creature's malevolent energy, now seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. I looked up at the sky, the stars twinkling above me. I had faced my fears, confronted the darkness, and emerged victorious. But I knew that the lake, with its ancient secrets and hidden dangers, would always be a part of me. The experience had changed me, forever altering my perception of the world, of the unseen forces that lurked just beyond the veil of reality. I left the forest that night, leaving the creature to its fate. I never returned to the lake, never fished its waters again. I lived a quiet life, haunted by the memories of that night, the whispers, the fear, and the creature that had almost claimed my soul. But I also carried with me a newfound respect for the power of nature, for the ancient forces that shaped our world. I learned that there are some things in this world that are best left undisturbed, some secrets that are best kept buried. I lived a quiet life, a life of solitude and reflection. I wrote about my experiences, my warnings falling on deaf ears. People dismissed my tales as the ramblings of a madman, the product of a fevered imagination. But I knew the truth. I knew that the lake, with its ancient power, was still out there, watching, waiting. I knew that the creatures that lurked in its depths were not mere legends, but terrifying realities. Years passed. I grew old, my hair turning white, my body weakened by age. But the memories of that night, the whispers, the fear, the creature, never faded. They remained with me, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of our world. One day, while browsing through an old newspaper archive, I stumbled upon an article about a series of strange disappearances in a small town near the lake. Fishermen, boaters, even tourists had vanished without a trace. The police were baffled, unable to explain the disappearances. A chilling realization dawned on me. The lake, with its ancient power, was awakening. The creatures, sensing the weakening of the ancient protections, were emerging from the depths, seeking new victims. I knew I had to warn someone, to share my knowledge, to prepare them for the dangers that lay ahead. But who would believe me? Who would listen to the ramblings of an old man, a man whose sanity had been questioned for years? I decided to write a book, a chilling account of my experiences on the lake, a warning to those who dared to venture into its depths. I poured my heart and soul into the book, hoping that someone, somewhere, would heed my warnings. The book was met with skepticism, dismissed as fiction, as a work of sensationalism. But I knew the truth. I knew that the lake was watching, waiting, its ancient power stirring beneath the surface. And I knew that one day, the world would remember my warnings, would learn to fear the whispers of the lake, the whispers of the ancient ones.